Hey, it's Sam, and welcome to the third video in the 8 Spokes of Astrology video series. In this video, I'm going to start really breaking down the structures of astrology and yoga and Ayurveda and all the Vedic sciences that we referred to in the first video. In fact, this video and the next couple, you want to really be paying attention because this is where I'm going to break down all of the systems and structures and principles and the sort of ratio of priority and sequence in that you need to know in order to unfold your astrology practice and your understanding of life, because these things aren't just limited to astrology. Again, these are the same principles that underpin yoga, Ayurveda, and of course astrology. So again, this is being done in preparation for my upcoming certification course. We have a lot of people already signed up. We're signing up the last few within the next few weeks, so you don't want to wait around and sort of lollygag, word you don't hear every day. You want to really focus your attention and pay attention to when the cart opens so that you can get registered. That will be quite soon. But again, in this video, what I'm going to do is start deepening the principles and the overview from the last video where we talked about the sacred timing of life here on Earth, 4.5 billion years, folded into the genius of everything. This was codified into the Vedic sciences, which first started with the ancient Vedas, the Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, and then down through the Upanishads, and then all of the epics and the Puranas, and then codified into the system of astrology. Underneath it all, we have this prevailing philosophy called Sanatana Dharma, which is the philosophy behind all of these teachings. And in this video, I'm going to talk about the gunas, elements, Purusharthas, karma, and dharma. I'm also mainly going to be turning to the mind map that you have. So you want to make sure and download that mind map if you haven't downloaded it yet, and also the handout where I have broken down a lot of these structures that we use in Vedic astrology. Because one of the things that happens, one of the reasons why people can't learn astrology very well, is because they're just trying to memorize a bunch of things, these sort of disconnected attributes, these disconnected ideas, like let's say Jupiter. Oh, Jupiter is guru, so it's good. What happens when you start to break things down along these principles is you start to understand that all of the planets, signs, houses, nakshatras, and everything in life winds up being broken down into these categories. And these categories are literally the building blocks of Sanatana Dharma and how spirit takes form. You remember in the last video when I was reading from the sutras, right from Prashahora, one of the first things in the first chapter he says is that once spirit takes form, it breaks off into 3 gunas and 5 elements. 3 gunas and 5 elements. That's why those two things are foundational to everything in existence. And basically, 3 gunas relate to tamas, rajas, and sattva, which translate into what you may call body, mind, and spirit, but much deeper than that. Each of the planets are related to the gunas. There's also an evolutionary process and whatnot. So gunas are foundational. Also elements. When you bring gunas and elements together, you get this, this matrix through which we unfold consciousness. And I'm going to talk about that now, especially as it relates to karma and dharma. So, karma and dharma are 2 of the most misunderstood Indian concepts, because we all kind of know what they mean, at least we think we do. We all kind of know that karma is sort of like, well, what comes around goes around. When you do good, good things happen. It's not entirely wrong, but it's also not entirely right. It's very limited. And dharma, again, is very personalized. We personalize everything way too much. Dharma is like, well, my dharma, me, my dharma, what's my dharma? Which, again, it's like kind of sort of clunking around relative to career and whatnot. Again, it's not entirely wrong, but it misses a lot. Basically, the way you really want to understand this is Dharma is essentially the truth, the highest truth. Not just the truth of like 2 + 2 = 4, or some other kind of thing where you say truth. Well, anything can be truth and we make everything relative. No, I mean the truth. Like the truth of what's really happening. I talked about a lot of that truth in the last video. That truth of we're a spiritual being in a limited form, identifying with this limitation, trying to evolve higher consciousness on a planet of infinite time. And we forget our true self. This is what I mean by truth. I mean the truth, not something that's correct, the truth. And relative to how much we remember the truth and put the truth into action, you heard that word, action, that's what our karma is. This is why karma literally means action. You can reduce karma to just a simple word, action. And again, it's very easy because we don't understand what action means relative to other things to miss the complexity of this. You can tell the truth of, you can tell how much truth someone has with a given situation based on their actions. This is what it means. Your actions are going to yield a result, and those results based on your actions are how you evolve consciousness and actually know the truth. It works in a circle. You can see the truth relative to what a person lives based on their actions, and your actions that come back to you, let's say painfully or in a beautiful way, are showing how much wisdom you have around that thing, how much truth you have about it. Karma is simply that. Now, that implies a lot, for sure, but karma is not just the bad stuff that happens. It's not just, karma's a bitch, you'll get your karma, karma's going to get you. It's often used that way. It's used as some kind of punishment. There is no God up there giving out carrots and sticks, punishing you when you do good, when you do bad things, and rewarding you when you do good things. Your actions are the punishment or the reward. Everything is based on your actions. What this means to say is that karma, with something that is often explained as a very inhibiting structure. Well, is that karma or free will? Is in fact the most liberating thing there is, because there's only your actions. This also means you're to blame for everything. Sorry to break it to you like that. I don't care how mean your father was or your mother, or I don't care what you've been through. No one does. The universe doesn't care. If that has happened, it's because that's what you needed to go through in order to learn what you're here to go through. In order to learn what you're here to learn. Like we talked about in the last video, Lord Vishnu is incarnated as the 9 planets to bestow on the living beings the fruits of their karmas based on their past actions. So you came in with a difficult childhood, it's because you needed to learn that. It wasn't to punish you. Because many people have a difficult childhood and it makes them the most sensitive, wonderful person ever. Find me a person who hasn't suffered. They don't exist. We all have suffering here. We all have a unique kind of suffering to teach us unique lessons. And our existence here is to evolve consciousness by purifying our actions. And your karma arrives in a present moment based on your past actions and gives you one moment of presence and free will. If you want to call it free will, that's fine. One moment of free will and presence after the next. The way you experience your life is nothing but free will, if you want to call it that. And what shows up in your life is nothing but karma. So you want to understand this. You want to understand this very, very deeply. When people ask me all the time, is it karma or free will? How much of the chart is karma? How much can we change? I don't like to even use the word free will, because the part of you, or the part of people that are usually saying free will, is usually their ego. How much of it can I change with my own will? Okay, that's one way to look at it, but when you're trying to change something with your own will, you're usually missing the point, because you're identified with the separate person who has the separate will, who is going to fight That's not entirely wrong. Again, it's not entirely wrong to look at it that way. But it's better to understand that you have every action that arrives, or I'm sorry, every moment that arrives, like this moment right now, is a culmination of everything you've done before. And right now, you're receiving a message, watching this video, other things are going on maybe as well. And if you're hearing it through the past aggression or whatever, you're going to receive it a certain way. If you're hearing it through presence and you're present, you'll hear it another way. Just like every other situation. Let's say situations that you have a hard time working through, like anger and fear. Mars and Saturn issues are quite difficult at times. But even, so is Venus and Mercury issues. Venus issues. Let's say you're attracted to something, but you know that this attraction is often difficult. Let's say like your attraction to food. The gentle planets are just as destructive. So again, this whole kind of pitting the good ones against the bad ones relative to astrology is, again, one of the biggest things, one of the biggest mistakes that we make. I'm going to talk about that in great detail in the next video, by the way. But staying focused, your karma with, let's say, Venus keeps arriving over and over again. We get many do-overs. Every time you sit down to eat a meal, you're dealing with your karmas of Venus relative to what it rules and its opposite, which is Mars, for example, which gives the discipline to, want to be personally strong and suffer for our principles. This is what Mars and Saturn do. They give us that power, and we all have these powers. When we're not willing to suffer for our principles, which is Mars, or make a commitment to something, even though it's going to be hard, which is Saturn, then we suffer the pain of that in the form of how that comes back to us. When we're not willing to suffer for our principles and be strong in the moment, which is Mars, we wind up being weak based on our actions. And the astrology chart is the tendencies. I look at it and I see the person's tendencies to be able to be disciplined and focused in the moment, Mars, or to be able to make a commitment to something even though it's going to be hard, which is Saturn. The point is, astrology and the planets are not these overlords, giving us carrots and sticks, good things, bad things. Our karma is not something lording over us. It's based on the aggregate of all of our actions from the past. All of that arrives in a present moment, and that present moment is nothing but free will. And that free will, or I prefer to call it presence. I talk about this a lot in my new book, Yoga and Vedic Astrology, but I prefer to look at it that way. So every moment arrives in the form of presence, which is framed by karma. Framed by your past actions. In other words, you're sitting where you're sitting now, doing what you're doing now in certain life circumstances now based on all of those actions you've taken. It's not going to change overnight. Your life has the circumstances that it has right now, and to change it is going to take a bunch of little actions to move it in another way. Also, someone who is, let's say that you got married 10 years ago and had kids, and now all of a sudden you want to be a ballet dancer because you wanted to do that when you were a teenager. Okay, it's hard to change that. You've taken a lot of actions and a lot of intention toward one path. You've gone very far down one path. It might not even be possible to do the other path. Everything is not possible. I'm 5'10", and I'm in my early 50s. I'm not going to play NBA. I'm not going to play in the NBA, in the basketball league. I'm not going to do that. That's just not going to happen. So everything is not possible at every moment, but every moment has the infinite potential of consciousness and presence, which again, when we understand the truth, is the only thing we really have anyway. That's the only thing we really have anyway, is our true self in whatever circumstance we're in. So this higher principle and higher understanding must be the origin of all astrology, and really of life. And this is why we start with understanding the Vedic teachings. We understand how they filter down into these concepts of Dharma and Karma as structures that frame Sanatana Dharma, the eternal truth. By the way, someone told me, one of my Indian followers or online contacts, that they love the way I say Sanatana Dharma. So good, I'm glad you liked it. So Sanatana Dharma is delivered through karma and dharma. Dharma is the truth, how much truth we actually understand, express, and know. And this understanding and expression is shown through our karma, which is our actions. And we have full responsibility for our actions. As it says in the Bhagavad Gita, inaction is impossible. Even not taking action is also an action. To resist an action is also an action. So karma works on all levels of body, mind, and spirit. Because when we're not doing something, it's because we're often avoiding it. That's also an action. So this is a very deep structure. You need to really understand this. Again, whether you study astrology, do astrology, or whatever you do, you need to understand this concept of karma. And so when we're looking at the astrology chart, we are looking at the person's relationship with these universal principles, which is what the planets are. I'm going to go over that in great detail in the next video. Sun is our power, Moon is connection, Mars is courage, Mercury is ideas, and how much sophistication and wisdom we have around each of those things. And we keep showing how much sophistication and wisdom we have around those things based on our actions. And the aggregate of those actions is what we call in general our karma. I look at your karma with that planet and the complexities around it. And at different cycles and transits, that karma becomes much more active, and we get the results of those karmas at different times within the aggregate kind of soup of our overall sort of makeup. So from that, I want to pivot now in this video and go over that mind map again, literally going over each one of these things in greater detail. Okay, so now I'm going to do the overview using the mind map. I'm going to go over each of the 3 gunas, 5 elements, 4 Purusharthas, the castes, and the truth of karma within that process, as you see on that handout, the mind map. So again, this is the crucial frameworks that emanated from the origins of astrology. And the first you see are actually the 3 gunas. And those 3 gunas are tamas, which is form, rajas, which is passion, and sattva, which is spirit. Now, I break them out into English concepts, into universal concepts and English words, because they're not just these kind of archaic Indian ideas. They really show the evolutionary process of our karma evolving through body, mind, and spirit. So, and they all have a dignified expression. Tamas is the power of form, but form can also obstruct more subtle vibrations. Rajas is the passion that gets us engaged with life, but it can also be that emotion and passion and desire that cuts off a higher possibility. And again, Rajas exists above form, because if we're just stuck in form, then Rajas passion gets us wanting to, break through the form, right? If you want to break through a sort of, rock, like if you want to smash a rock, you need some action. You need to take something and go bam. So it's like that motion is the Rajas. And then Sattva is spirit, which is subtle, feelings, higher concepts related to wisdom and love and harmony. So one way to really understand it is tamas, or form, and sattva, or spirit, are at 2 ends of the spectrum, and rajas goes in between the two. In the diagram that I used in the video a few days ago, in the first video, you see that picture of Sankhya philosophy, and once spirit takes form as the 3 gunas, you have tamas on one side, which breaks out into 5 elements. 5 elements are tamasic. And then you have rajas in between, and then you have sattva, which then shows how those 5 elements become what are called jnana indriyas and karma indriyas, or the organs of knowledge and the organs of action. So those things are more sattvic, but in between the two is rajas. So the way you can understand that is that the world is very rajasic. We're very rajasic with a lot of energy, excitement, emotion, and passion. And that passion is aspiring to be sattvic, or pure, and to unfold wisdom and beauty, and trying not to get pulled down by tamas, or ignorance, or form. So the gunas, very important. Again, in the next video, I'm going to talk about all the planet signs, houses, in relationship to the three gunas and how we evolve through these three gunas. So you definitely want to watch the next video, next one after that. All of them are going to keep building on each other. So this is a great series of videos where I get to unfold the whole system and the whole system of principles and structures and processes that I use in the certification course, so that you can learn astrology systematically instead of just arbitrarily. The reason you've not been able to learn astrology yet is because it's so arbitrary and so random. You're just pulling random things. And frankly, most teachers, they just teach things in this very random way. Okay, this sign is this, and it's a bunch of stuff. You can't make sense of it unless you have these frameworks. That's what I'm going to do in the next video, is show how these frameworks actually come into practice. And in fact, the handout from the last video has a South Indian astrology chart with a lot of these systems on it. So you'll be able to see that as well. So next is the 5 elements. And the 5 elements work in concert with the 3 gunas. In fact, the 3 gunas break out into the 5 elements to form life. That's what forms the tamasic guna. And in many ways, the elements are the more specific and refined quality of the tamasic guna. So 5 elements, which again has to do with form. Form is created by 5 elements. But each one of those elements also have an evolution. They also evolve. Form also evolves into spirit through the element of earth, for example. So 5 elements are earth, water, fire, air, and space, or ether. So again, your body has a preponderance of earth because it's solid. But then once all you need to do is cut the skin a little bit, and what comes out? Juice, which is related to water. How it becomes water, though, is that you eat food, and then the fire in your body breaks it down. But of course you can't have literally fire, so the fire is in the fluids. So the acidic digestive fluids in your body turn food into blood and juice, right? You're a bag of juice walking around. And the reason you're able to digest is from fire. And then that fire creates air. It creates thoughts in your mind, which is related to air. It also creates movement and motion, which is related to air. So air is about movement and motion of all sorts. And that movement and motion, let's say of your physical body, takes place in space. Space is the container of everything. Space is also the container of your thoughts. You ever wonder why you can perceive your thoughts and look at your thoughts and watch your thoughts? Well, who's watching? Who's watching the thoughts? Well, that's you in pure consciousness behind the thoughts. So space is the container of everything. Notice the space where you are right now. Notice, you're sitting in a room and you notice all the objects, but notice the space. So space is fundamental. Everything exists in space. Air moves through space, just like thoughts in your head move through your brain, but you can perceive them from a place of space. That motion and that air is created by fire. Just like, for instance, you throw something in the fire. Let's say, when you're doing a puja, you throw something in the fire, and the fire digests it and disperses it up into space. That's what fire is. And you say, well, what's the transition from water to fire? Well, it's like this. Earth and water make plants. Literally, when you have earth by itself, it's just an element. When you add water to earth, it creates plants. Again, it took 4 billion years for that to happen. Don't forget where we started. We started with the timeline in the previous video, right? And so that timeline, and it shows how long it took for all of this to organize itself the way we have it now, a moderation of the 5 elements. But when you add water to earth, you get plants. And the fire exists when you burn the plants. So burning plants creates fire. That's how we create fire, by the way. Some version of that, even now. Sometimes we, now we burn coal, or even nuclear is not necessarily a plant, but it's the building blocks. So that's how fire is created out of water. That's how earth and water create fire in the form of the plants. Okay, and so this is how the 5 elements sort of sort of coexist to create form, and each one has a corresponding psychology. Like the psychology of Earth is steady and solid, but it can also make us stuck and resistant and stubborn. But it's also where we need to make something tangible happen. If someone doesn't have Earth, let's say in their chart, they have a hard time finishing things and making it into a practical form, like making the, making the painting, or finish writing the article, or finish doing the tangible thing. So each one has that. Air, for example, is very good with ideas, but it might not be so grounded and all of that. So earth, water, fire, air, and space are the 5 elements which come after the 3 gunas. Then we have what are called the 4 Purusharthas, which are Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. This is how life unfolds. This is how we create everything. In the astrology chart, particularly with the houses, you can really look at the 4 Purusharthas. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha repeats 3 times through houses 1 through 4. That's the personal part of Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Houses 5 through 8 are related to us and others. And then houses 9 through 12 are Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha in a more universal sense. So how do they show our evolution and creativity? Well, Dharma is the truth. So let's say it's in the first part of the houses, which has to do with your individuality. The first house is the truth of who you are. Again, because we get lost in our personality and we get lost in the physical body and all of that, we don't know who we are. The more we know who we are, then the more we will enjoy ourselves and experience the truth in all of our personal interactions. But however much truth we have values, which is the second house. Our personal values are Artha. So Artha is about values. It's not money. Again, it's codified to mean money. It's not money. Money is an expression of Artha. It's an expression of value. It's an expression of wealth. But you can make money and then have it not be congruent with your values, and then you won't even be able to enjoy the money. You'll waste the money. You won't respect the money. You see this all the time with people who don't work for their money. Maybe they just got an inheritance and they blow money they have no respect for because it's not connected to their value and their hard work. So Artha is about values. Now again, start from the beginning. The better you know yourself, which is Dharma, the more congruent your values will be with your identity. And this is how we're evolving. We're always comparing. Is this thing in harmony with my identity? Does my identity show up with this thing of value? Then the third house, the third house, or the third rung of the Purushartha is Kama, which means desire and happiness. And this is how, again, we evolve our values. We all start with a certain value system that comes from our family. Let's go back to the beginning. You were raised in a certain way in a certain family, and that Artha, your values in that family and the values of that family were a certain thing. But what about your values? Who am I? What do I really like to do? How do I really express myself? That's what Kama is in, let's say, the third house. Kama is also the seventh house, which is the enjoyment you want to have with another person, for example. But the way that we evolve our Artha, or our personal values, is by what? Our interests and the things I like to do for me. Okay, well, my family comes from this, my family is like this, but I like these things. These are the things I like to do. These are the things that are an expression of my values and of what I like. Or are they? Then we get to really find out the sort of culmination of all of that in the fourth house, let's say, of the individual, which is moksha. Moksha it's said to be liberation, but it's actually where we let go, where we surrender and go into ourself. In the fourth house, it's the moksha, it's personal moksha, where all of our interests and all of that energy of the third house is also the main house of ego. All of that energy and interest and ego of the third house creates a feeling. Well, how does that really make me feel? What does my intuition tell me? Is that really something that I need to keep doing? This is why after a while we have some interests, third house, but then after a while that doesn't really feel so good anymore. So we start doing something different. So then it goes back into the third house. We stop doing that, and then our values, second house, becomes more affirmed, and then our identity becomes more clear. So this is how Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha creates everything. The more congruent we are with who our truthful self is, which is first house, the more our values and our money and the solid structures, our friends, our possessions, are an extension of that. And then the more our third house of interests will be functioning within parameter of things that are congruent with our values. Sometimes, as we're trying to discover ourselves, we have interests that are not congruent with our values. In fact, all the time. That's how we know they're not congruent with our values. Or we do them for a while and then we stop. We start partying all the time. Hey, I want to have fun. And then after a while we stop. Because in the fourth house of moksha, after a while it doesn't feel so good anymore. It's not so much fun anymore. That's moksha. So Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha is always happening. And it happens through 3 stages. Again, I'll talk more about this in the next video as well with each of the astrology houses. So then there's castes as well. And the castes have a lot to do with the signs and a certain quality of energy and action and vocation. So there's the warrior, which is related to fire signs. Warrior, or what we're called kshatriyas, are the warrior caste. And they're leaders, business leaders, generals, people in law enforcement, other things, again, not just that, but even like business leaders and people in positions of power. They used to be, they used to call them like the king and the army, because that's what, those were the positions of power. But now the kings are like business leaders, people that hold a lot of power. Because a business leader is a king. He's got a lot of resources. And now, businesses run governments. So, those positions of power and what protect power is the warrior caste. Then the worker caste is, as it says, the worker, the ones that do the labor. As they say, somebody's got to make the donuts. That's a statement that you hear now, at least that I've heard. Everybody can't be a great thought leader, business leader, somebody's got to just be happy doing the work, and some people are. So the worker caste, what we're called the Sudras, are people that work hard. And it doesn't necessarily mean, shoveling dirt or whatever like it used to. Now it can just mean jobs that are more menial, that are just kind of, even like administrative, like when you're talking about jobs. Something even like an accountant. Again, there's some accounting that's very creative, but sometimes it's just a kind of maintenance job where you're doing labor. And literally things like maintenance, or like installing refrigerators, or installing, heating and cooling, and electricians, you would say, are more in the worker caste. That whole group of those kinds of jobs are workers. Again, there's nothing demeaning about it at all. So again, to evolve these things in a modern context, that's how you would see that. And then merchant have to do with like business owners. Not necessarily, I just said business owners were warriors. These are like titans of business. But like, for instance, I would be considered a merchant. I have my own business, you would say. I'm an entrepreneur. So merchant, again, it's a psychology. It's not necessarily a sort of tit for tat, but you'll see that the merchant, it's actually related to air signs. Warrior is related to fire. Worker is related to earth signs. Merchant is related to air signs because it's about an even exchange. A good merchant is someone who gives you a fair deal, and they expect a fair deal as well. So that's the merchant mentality. That kind of sharing is big in the merchant mentality. Good merchants are ones who strike a good deal for themselves and for others. They don't want to take advantage either, whereas sometimes maybe the warrior sort of business, titans and business leaders, they might just be interested in their own kind of profits, and the heck with the rest. They could be. And then there's the teacher, or the Brahmin caste, which is the guides and the advisors. And in this day and age, it's also people that inspire us, like even like musicians and great artists who inspire us, like teachers. This is literally what Brahmin is the teacher. Well, it says teacher, which were also called the Brahmins. But they were also like priests, and people that lead us or guide us are Brahmin. And so that, as I say, the obvious implications are people like spiritual teachers and spiritual leaders, but also, as I say, like great musicians, and often, people that inspire us. That's often our first teachers. We get inspired by, following this band, or, oh yeah, they really inspired me to do that. Usually we want to evolve that towards something that's more pure and find teachings and teachers that are more reflective of higher Dharma and purpose, not just the world around us. And then I talked about the truth of karma already quite a bit, but again, it's just the results of our actions and how they come back to us. And it's really a process of embodied truth. Literally, the truth that we embody based on our actions. It's very profound. And it includes two things: presence, as I said, and predeterminism. When I say predeterminism, it's what's often talked about as karma, but it's the thing that this moment that you're in right now was predetermined by your past actions. It wasn't predetermined by the planets. You can look at the planets as what your actions would likely be, but your actions predetermined everything about the situation you're in right now. And the actions you're going to take now are going to predetermine within larger cycles of time what those results will be. Like, for instance, you're sitting where you're at right now, you have presence, and you have to fill that empty presence with something. Let's say you fill it with, drinking 3 gallons of coffee. Okay? That's going to predetermine something. Once you do that, you've shot the arrow. The arrow has now left, and it's moving, and you can't pull it back. Or let's say instead you drink some Tulsi tea and, meditate. That's going to predetermine exactly what it predetermines. You start adding the cycles of every little action and every little inaction, every avoidance, over a day, over weeks, over years, over lifetimes. Then you see the main things that shape your tendency to see things that way. That's what the chart shows, all the tendency you came in with, and how you keep just seeing it that way over and over again and feeling kind of stuck in those tendencies. So astrology helps to unravel what those tendencies are, but never leaves the virtue of the fact that you have total presence within any circumstance at all times. Okay? So that's pretty powerful stuff. And I hope you liked this video. We're really getting into the good stuff. The next video I'm going to go over planet signs, houses, nakshatras, and give some really powerful examples, not just general references to how things evolve and elements generally. I'm going to talk specifically about how to use those elements and gunas with planet signs, houses, nakshatras, and how they sort of interact with each other. In the future videos, I'm going to show how they interact with each other, like in the form of yogas and other different structures when we get into what's called priority and sequence in a future video, where we talk about how to actually organize those things. It becomes very powerful. You start to see how things like the aspects and the house rulerships and the dignities, all of those calculations start to be actually applied to charts. So that's upcoming in the next few videos, and you want to also be paying attention to when I open up the registration for the course. We had literally 85 registrants last year, 52 graduates last year. So much positive, good stuff ahead for everyone. Have a great staff ready to teach you astrology and just blow it up for you. So I can't wait to do that again. And go ahead and leave some comments here and share this video with others. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video.